tells me something about you. And what it tells me is that you're smart, forward-thinking people who are trying to be the very best kind of boss or supervisor or colleague that you possibly can. And that involves developing some skills when it comes to working with people who aren't like you. So let's get started. I just want to actually share a little bit of data first that I think will help set the stage. And that is, the census has been tracking diversity for the last 4 decades. And while we're waiting for the census results for the 2020 census, you can see here that they have this thing called the diversity index, which sounds complex, but all it means is if you grab any 2 people at random anywhere in the United States, what's the likelihood that those 2 people will be of different races or ethnicities? So in 1980, if I grabbed any 2 people at random anywhere in the United States, I had a 34% probability that those 2 people would be of different races or ethnicities. Or in other words, I had a 66% probability that they were going to be of the same race or ethnicity, probably white, because white was the predominant race then. But look how fast it's changed. In 3 decades, it went from a 34% probability to a 52% probability. And while the full census results and findings for the 2020 census have not yet been released, one of the things that the Census Bureau is doing is feeding us little bits of the report. And the 2020 census for July, in July, they released the diversity index for this year, and it's 65. So even in the last 10 years, we went from a 52% probability to a 65% probability. So that's a huge gain of 13 percentage points. So now, right here now today, if I grab any 2 people at random anywhere in the United States, I have a 65% chance that they're going to be of the same race or ethnicity. And this is a very clear trend. It's not a fad. The difference between a fad and a trend is fads come and go, like fashion. Trends don't come and go. Trends are shifts. And so we're becoming more diverse, and that's a very clear trend. This is another little fun fact that I found that I thought was interesting because it shows not just a demographic change, but a societal acceptance change. So 1 in 6 marriages now is to a spouse of a different race or ethnicity. And when I came across this stat, it kind of blew my mind because it wasn't that long ago that this simply wasn't done. It just wasn't done. In fact, it was 1958 when blacks and whites were legally allowed to marry. So there was a time when it was actually illegal, and then for a number of decades after that, it just simply wasn't done. But now 1 in 6 marriages is to a spouse of a different race or ethnicity. But when I talk about people not like you, I like to talk about it in a broader sense because we're not just changing racially and ethnically. We certainly are. We're changing in every way, politically, socially, fiscally, increasingly with a shrinking middle class, and religiously. And I choose these words, people not like you, because I don't just think that those are the ways that we can be different. My definition of diversity is sort of any way you can be different from me. So for example, I don't have children. But I'm in the minority of women my age. So most women my age have kids. And I can be standing right next to a woman who could be my age, white, makes the same household income, lives in the same zip code. And demographically, we would look like we're the same. But if she has children and I don't, we're going to be very different in ways that really matter. So here's some ways that you might not have thought about diversity, and you can find this in people that you work with. What about introverts and extroverts? I'm an extrovert, and I'm married to a man who's an extreme introvert. I swear that he would be a hermit if I let him. And so we're as different as can be on that. How about creative versus analytic thinking? I mean, you would know this because people who are engineers and people who are in design and things like that are very different. They think very differently than people who are, let's say, graphic artists. So we have creative versus analytic thinking. How about morning people versus night owls? I'm sure that most of you are morning people. In my experience in your industry, it's all about, getting an early start on the day and working really hard. But, if you've ever worked with night owls, they're on a whole different time clock. Small business owners versus large corporate executives. They have very different scales of problems and very different needs. Regional differences. There's no doubt in my mind that the North is different from the South, the East Coast is different from the West. Communication styles. Some people prefer to sit down, have a face-to-face meeting or a Zoom call. Other people are like, why do we need to do that? Just text me. And Apple versus Google people. I mean, obviously this is a little bit of levity, but I really do think that these are 2 totally different worlds. So our differences can create friction. And one of the ways that I see this in a very common thread is I will be often hired by companies that have a lot of older executives, and they'll say to me, Kelly, can you come in and talk to us about the millennials? We just don't get them. They have no work ethic, and they want to bring their dog to work, and they want to leave early for yoga, and they're very frustrated working with millennials because they don't understand them. And I always say to them, look, if you are frustrated, I promise you that the other person feels that frustration and is equally frustrated. And then what happens is these guys are like, no, we're fine. It's the millennials that are the problem. And so what I always say is, look, you're frustrated with all of their attitudes and work habits, and they're looking at you and saying, how come that guy can't open an attachment? So the point is the differences that we all have can create friction, and different can also really be uncomfortable. And at work, the challenge is if it's uncomfortable, you also don't feel like you can talk about that because it's too risky. You just can't. It's risky because honestly, your job could be at risk. You say the wrong thing to the wrong person, they take it the wrong way, boom, you're out. Or maybe your company gets sued for $70 million. I mean, the stakes are high. Or maybe you don't lose your job or get sued, but you're suddenly branded as somebody who's not on the diversity bandwagon. Or you could get branded with a horrible, horrible label, like racist, bigot, homophobe, xenophobe, Islamophobe, the list goes on and on. So what happens is people keep quiet. They're struggling, but they keep quiet. And then what happens is if you're uncomfortable around people, you avoid those people. And that's not good for business. That's never, ever good for business. It's all about bridging those differences and having good conversations. So just because you're keeping quiet and you're avoiding people also doesn't mean that the struggle goes away. You're just silently suffering. So I'm here to tell you that if you're struggling to work with anyone who's not like you and you feel that friction or that tension, you're normal. That's actually a normal reaction. You're not a bad person. You're definitely not alone. The discomfort that you feel is actually normal. Social psychologists have identified that all of us want to surround ourselves with people who are like us. And an example that I would give you, it's a rhetorical example, but imagine if you would in your mind, let's say a Chamber of Commerce meeting. And that Chamber of Commerce meeting is having a social networking kind of thing. And imagine that the room is filled with 100 men in their, let's say, 50s and early 60s, sort of pillar of the community, or men and women. And now imagine that you throw a 25-year-old into the room. I'll tell you what's going to happen. That 25-year-old would look around that room and scan the room, and what they'd be looking for is someone who's closer to their age. So we do it without even thinking about it. We gravitate to the people who are most like us. So if you're feeling discomfort, that makes you normal. So I have a question for you. This is a polling question, and I'd like your answers here. So the question that I have is, have you experienced any tension or friction in working with people who are not like you, either as teammates, customers, or suppliers? And so that tension could be racial tension or friction, gender tension or friction, generational, like millennials or boomers, all of the above, or no, none of the above, or yes, I've experienced friction, but not with any of those groups. So now I'm going to turn the poll on, and if you would go ahead and start to put your responses in. Let's see. Let's see, here we go. You should have an opportunity now. Yep, I see that you're responding. This is great, okay? I just kind of want to see what the pattern is of where the tension is. And I think that you can see the same thing that I can, which is about 77% have already voted. Yep, so keep it up, here we go. Okay, so I think we have a conclusion here, pretty much. So what we have is 63% of the group saying that there's definitely generational tension. So perhaps the example that I just used, you can relate to. And another 25% saying all of the above. And then one person saying, yes, definitely friction, but not with any of the above groups. So this is interesting, and I'll try to tailor my comments to address these things. So you're obviously here for a reason. All right, I'm gonna end the polling. And there it is. You can see the results right there. The majority is the generational. Okay. So let's see. Oh, share results. There we go. I hope you can all see that now. There you go. Okay, I'm going to move on. Thank you for participating in that. Now, why is it so hard, and why is it important in the first place? Why do people actually spend time and money on this? It's one simple answer that why working with people not like us is important. Because I mean, if there's tension, why wouldn't it just be easier to just surround yourself with people who are just like you? Wouldn't that make everything easier? It certainly would, but that's not good for business. And so the key reason that it's important to work with people not like you is because if you surround yourself with people who are just like you could miss something big. It's that simple. You could miss something big. So let me give you an example that I know women can relate to, and I hope that men can too, is that there's this product called Skinny Girl. And whether you've seen it, whether you've tried it, I'm betting most of you have at least seen it or been aware of it. What it is a good tasting, low calorie cocktail. So here's the backstory on it. Bethany Frankel had this idea that women might really like a good tasting, low calorie cocktail that didn't blow 40% of their day's calories. She approached every single major liquor company in the United States with this idea, every single one of them. And every single one of them turned her down. She forged ahead, built the brand on her own, and 2 years later, after selling 400 million cases of Skinny Girl, Beam, as in Jim Beam, bought her company back from her for $100 million. $100 million. The same company, the same brand that they'd actually taken a pass on just 24 months earlier. And I don't know about you, but 24 months in my life goes like this. So what happened? Well, here's what I surmise. The liquor companies that she approached are almost exclusively at the very top leadership levels, men. And that's not a sexist comment, it's fact. And men metabolize calories differently than women do. It's just harder for us guys. You have to trust me on this. You guys are like, oh, I gotta lose 25 pounds, and you cut out one potato chip a week and you're down. And women are like, dieting for months and eating 3 pieces of lettuce. It's just harder for us. So what I think happened is when she went in pitching this idea, the men in the room weren't saying that's a stupid idea or that's dumb. They simply couldn't relate. They were just like, I don't know if that would sell. I promise you that if they'd had some women around the table, those women would have been like, believe me, it'll sell. And it did, to the tune of 400 million cases in 2 years. So in this case, it was a failure of perspective. And that's why this is important, because if you only get the same kinds of perspectives around the conference room table, metaphorically, then you miss things. So let's put a little science behind this. Social psychologists wanted to find out what happens if we take groups of people who are alike and then we add an outsider. So they wanted to take race and ethnicity off the table because that can get a little sticky. And so what they used instead for groups of likeness were sorority sisters and fraternity brothers. They used groups of 3. And what they did was they gave each of these groups a murder mystery to solve. They gave them 20 minutes with some clues, and then they turned them loose. But 5 minutes into the exercise, some of the groups were joined by a 4th sorority sister or a 4th fraternity brother, but from a different house. So that's the outsider. They're still all in college, they're in Greek life, but this one's an outsider. So what happened? Well, it's a no-brainer. You can see this coming a mile away. Those that had the outsider solved the murder mystery better, faster, and more accurately a significant percentage of the time. But that's not where it gets interesting. Outsiders made the team better statistically, more than doubling their chances. That is like statistically off the charts. But the interesting part was when asked afterwards, hey, how did you feel? Hey, Tony, you're group 1. How does that feel? High five, you must feel amazing. What the winners reported was that the experience was awful. They said things like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that we were even making progress or succeeding. All we did was bicker. The point is, working with diverse team members felt harder because it is harder, but it produces a better outcome. So my point on this is, if you're working with people who are not like you and you feel that friction and it's hard, you're not crazy and you're not doing it wrong. It is hard. That's why people don't want to do it. It's hard. But if you stick with it, you will always, always get to a better outcome. It's been proven time and time again, which is why businesses are spending so much time on diversifying their workforce and trying to get different perspectives. So how do you do that? I'm going to cover 7 ways to work with people not like you. The first is, I think this is an important one right now for sure, because it's about making work equitable for your work from home team. And you might think like, what does that mean? But one of the things that you can do is ensure that all of your team members who are working from home actually have the resources and the tools that they need to perform their jobs. And you might think, well, of course they do, but that doesn't mean it's the same or that they're adequate. Let me give you an example. I live in Denver, Colorado, and my business manager lives in a rural suburb outside of Denver called Evergreen. So she's in a much more rural community. We both have Wi-Fi, obviously, but the speed with which she can download a video or a large file is drastically different than mine because of bandwidth. So even though we both have Wi-Fi, it's not the same. And I've had to take that into consideration when we're jamming on a deadline and she's still saying, I've got 2 more minutes for this thing to download. So ask and make things available to the people who need them if things aren't equitable. Try to level the playing field. Also, this may be something that you've never thought of, but you probably aren't aware that most virtual platforms, including Zoom that we're on right now, have closed captioning abilities. And this is an important thing to turn on. And it's not just for people who are hard of hearing, but let me start with that. For those who have a little bit of hearing loss, it can be very difficult on a group meeting to hear clearly what people are saying. It's not the same as being in a room with them. And then also for some people who have some background noise, or maybe there's been a distraction, it's very helpful for them to actually see the words. The retention is better. Also, begin meetings by acknowledging everybody in the room, not just the people who have the highest status or privilege or, the top bananas. It's important to say, thank you, everybody. Thank you, marketing, sales, operations, whatever. People like to be acknowledged. Build trust. So there's tons and tons and tons of management books on the importance of trust. But one of the things people always go is, all right, so how do I do that? You can't just snap your fingers and say, trust me. Well, social psychologists have identified that there's actually 2 kinds of trust, not one. And the first kind is called common trust. Common trust is actually granted to people without having to earn it. You do it every day. I do it every day. We don't even think about it. It's the kind of trust that when you're driving on the road, you have to trust that the person coming head on the other, on the other lane is not going to cross that median and hit you head on. You don't know them. You're never going to know them. You have no idea what kind of a driver they are, but you have to trust that they're going to stay in their lane and you're going to do your part. If you go out to eat or you order food in, you have to trust that the cook didn't poison you. So every day we have to actually put our lives in the hands of people we don't know, and it's a blanket trust, and that's why we call it common trust. But the kind of trust that leaders have is called vulnerability trust. And vulnerability trust does have to actually be cultivated and earned, and it has to be reciprocated. And this is important because people look at this graphic and they always kind of focus on the woman with the apple on her head, and they think like, wow, she's really got to have trust in that archer because, she's sitting there with an apple this big on her head. That person, that archer has to have incredibly precise aim. And that's true. She has to have that trust in him, but he has to trust her too. He has to trust her not to flinch, because if he's taking precise aim and she moves even a half an inch, all bets are off. This paradigm, this graphic only works if they trust each other. So how do you build vulnerability trust? It is about talking straight and being honest even when it's hard. And if there's ever been a time that's tested difficult times at work, it's now. I'm sure some of you have had to furlough people, or you're just getting by with less, your resources are fewer. It's tough. And one thing that you can do that will build trust and bond you with your teammates and your people is to just be honest with them. Nothing will erode trust faster than people wondering what you're not telling them. So be straight. And if you've got bad news to give people, give it to them straight. Tell them, I have some difficult news. Tony, I need to have a conversation with you. I have some difficult news. People can handle the truth. What they can't handle is the runaround. Also, use simple language. It's like ripping the Band-Aid off. When people know that there's a problem and they understand it, they want to grasp onto the simple language. So let me give you my favorite example of this. Toyota is one of my clients, and Toyota will tell you that they don't sell cars. They make cars. Dealers sell cars. So they're incredibly dependent upon their dealer body to be successful. Well, they were having a problem with trucks. Truck sales were off, And when truck sales are off, everything's off for Toyota, especially gross profit, because that's where the profit is. You cannot make up with Corollas and Camrys what you're missing on trucks. So they called together a meeting of the top 30 truck dealers in the country. These are the 30 dealers across the country who sell like 85, 90% of all the trucks in the United States. And they pulled them together, and I was there, and this meeting went exactly like this. The senior VP of sales walked into the room, thanked the dealers for coming, and then said, "We can't hit our sales numbers unless we hit our truck numbers." You don't have to be an automotive professional to understand what the issue is. It's very clear. So the dealers kind of thought about that for a second, and then they followed it up with, Toyota followed it up with, "So what do you need from us to help you sell more trucks?" Well, the dealers put their heads together for 30 minutes, and they came up with a list, things that you would expect, like more product training, more inventory on the good stuff, enhanced marketing funds, incentives, promotions. But the point is, there was no PowerPoint, there were no graphs, there was no business buzzword bingo. This entire meeting took 45 minutes. It was the most high-level meeting I've ever been at, and it went down exactly like that. What do you need? We can't hit our numbers unless we hit our truck numbers. What do you need from us to help you sell more trucks? So I find it interesting that when the most complex problems need to be solved, large global companies revert to simple language to get it done. And also be aware that our differences are real. A lot of people think that, in this kumbaya world that we live in, or political correctness, that we can't acknowledge our differences and that we have to just say that we are all the same. We're not. We're all equal, but we're not the same. And those differences that we have not only can be acknowledged, but they should be acknowledged, because that's part of the different perspectives that you get. So let me give you an example, a real example. It's kind of funny, but it's also drives the point home. A friend of mine, his name is Scott. He's a retail professional. And so he's been like a regional vice president for major multi-unit retailers for years. And the first 25 years of his career, he spent at Lowe's. And the home improvement industry, and I'm not trying to be sexist, this is just the real, the home improvement category draws a lot of men to it. So I don't know, you guys like hardware and lumber and power tools, but it's a very male-dominated industry, and especially the higher you go. So for 25 years, Scott is working with virtually all men. And then he changes jobs and he goes to work for Sally Beauty Supply. And of course, you see where this is going. All of a sudden, he's working with all women, because just as the home improvement category draws a lot of men, the beauty category draws a lot of women. So he's suddenly working with all women. He's 60 days on the job. I take him out to lunch and I'm like, "Hey, how's it going?" And he's like putting his head down on the table and he's like, "Oh my God. It's so different." And I said, "What's so different?" He goes, "It's all women." And I said, "Well, you knew that, what's so different?" And he's like, "They're so different." And I said, How can it be that different?" And he said, "Let me tell you, I was having my first meeting with my district managers, 8 district managers, all women. And one of them, her sales were in the toilet in her region, in her district. So he starts talking to her about it and she starts crying. And at first I didn't believe him. I was like, "You don't mean crying. You mean like she's whining, right?" And he goes, "No, tears, Kelly, tears." And I said, "Oh my gosh, what did you do?" And he said, "I had no idea what to do. Nothing in 25 years at Lowe's ever prepared me for this. I've never worked with any man who started crying over sales." So I said, "But seriously, what did you do?" And he said, "I did the only thing I could think to do." And I said, "Talk to me. Tell me what's going on and how can I help, and how I can help." And if you break this down, it's actually genius. Talk to me. Let's get a dialogue going. What's going on, which gets to what is the problem, so I can help you. He didn't say, "Why are you crying?" which only would have made her shut down. And what he found by asking it this way and coming across as supportive and sincere is she wasn't crying over sales. She was upset. And for many of us, when we get upset, it manifests itself in our eyes. I mean, it literally looks like tears, and we know that. And so then we start telling ourselves, "Don't cry, don't cry." But for a lot of women, especially when we get upset or emotionally riled up, it manifests itself in our eyes. And she was upset because she felt like her sales performance was letting her new boss down. That was what the issue was. She wasn't crying over sales. She felt embarrassed and ashamed because she felt like she was letting her new boss down. And once he realized that, he was able to reassure her and say, "You're not. I've seen your sales performance in the past. Your track record speaks for itself. You're an amazing district manager, but clearly something is going on in your district. Let's talk about what that is and how I can help you." So a couple of quick things then about working with women and working with men. because I did see that some of you have that gender issue. These are broad generalizations, but you'll find that they actually do work. So with women, women value expansive choices, and we like seeing all of our options. We're not overwhelmed with options. We actually feel empowered. I can look at 175 different colors of blouses, and I know I want the tangerine one because I looked at all 175, and that's the one I want. Men, on the other hand, want their choices simplified. So I always say, I'm sorry, you guys, but there's a reason that your clothes only come in 3 colors, black, navy, khaki. And it's not only true, but the science behind it is that men like the number 3. 2 is not enough choice, and 4 is too much. 3 is seriously the perfect number. And there's real retail science behind this. So just to illustrate how important this is, men buy more electronics than any other consumer group, more flat screens, more tablets, more phones, more cameras, more electronics. Haven't you ever noticed that when you go shopping for electronics, all of the pricing is done in groups of 3? Because it works for men. Even stuff that's not electronics, that's heavily targeted to men like tires, it works in groups of 3. So here's how you might use this in business. Let's say that you are working with a client, and that client is a woman, and you're trying to get a decision. You might say, well, here are all the ways that we could do this. I've got a number of different options. Any one of them would be an adequate solution, but let me take you through them. And you would give her everything. And if your client is a guy in that same situation, you would say, there's a number of different ways we can proceed. Let me walk you through my top 3 recommendations. Or here's our 3 newest products, or whatever. Narrow it down to 3, you'd be amazed how much that's appreciated. And that goes to giving people what they want. It's such a simple concept. So even big companies, global companies in categories like burgers actually do this. Burger King doesn't even sell the same stuff everywhere. If you go to New York City and you get their breakfast sandwich, it's served on a bagel. And that same sandwich in Birmingham, Alabama is served on a biscuit. So it's such a little tweak, but give people what they want. What people want right now is personalized communication. And we're all starving for, human contact, because as human beings, we're socially designed to be together. So video conferencing like this and attending things like this is very helpful during a time like this when we can't necessarily be together. But I would say, let your clients dictate the method that they would like to be contacted. Let them drive. Because even though we have this tool, there is this thing that is very real that's called Zoom fatigue. And I know you know what it means. I mean, just people who have been on video calls all day. It is a little more tiring to be on a video call because you have to look at the camera and you have to sit up straight and you can't look out the window. Even if you're paying attention, you just can't let your attention, or your gaze go somewhere else. So that fatigue is real. And engage in whatever way is best for them. I talked to a client the other day and I said, do you want to have a Zoom call or do you want to have just a call? And she was like, can we just have a regular phone call? She said, I can give you my full attention and I can also walk around the house and water my plants. And I thought, what a great thing. And so you can ask your clients, do you want a video call or a regular call? Would you rather have morning or afternoon? For those who are actually trying to see a client, there's not much you can do. But one thing you can do is go for a walk, and I've had a lot of people tell me, especially those in sales, they'll say, let's get together and go for a walk. And they get together and they meet at a Starbucks or whatever, and they walk around the block or something and they talk, just like you would on the golf course. Here's what people don't want anymore. They don't want your big, long, rambling emails. Nobody wants that. We're all getting too much email. Would you rather read this or would you rather read this? It's the same email. White space and bullet points are your friends. So there's only 2 reasons why we send an email. I either want you to know something or I want you to do something. So if my intention of sending that email is to communicate to you what I want you to know or something that I want you to do, why wouldn't I want to make it as easy as possible for you to skim through that email and find the action item? In fact, we are so much not into reading anymore that there's actually, language evolves and we use these acronyms that help us communicate, like LOL, or BRB, or TTYL. I don't know if you've seen this one, too long didn't read. It's a thing. And so when you think about your emails, try to make them short and spread out your content with white space and bullet points. Agree to disagree. I don't know about you, but I was taught these words as a child. I was taught that it was polite, that if I agree with Tony or I agree with somebody else, and we cannot move off of that, we're just butting heads, that the thing that I should say, the polite thing, was to say, let's just agree to disagree, shall we? The thing is, it doesn't work. It sounds dismissive, and it really is more importantly a conversation ender. Because if I say, let's agree to disagree, we're done. Here's a better way. A better way is to say, I see it differently. Because it's not antagonistic, it's not judgmental. I'm not saying I'm right and Tony's wrong. I'm not being combative. And frankly, I'm not even trying to persuade him over to my point of view. I'm simply making a statement that I see it differently. So if you look at this graphic, I love this because is it 606 or is it 909? It's both. It's possible for two people to look at the exact same thing and see it differently. So this is also not a conversation ender. I promise you that if I were to say to Tony, I see it differently, that his response would be something like, tell me how you see it. And then we'd be having a conversation and not a debate. So this is a better way. Also, take the emotion out of it. You know, we get emotional, and I'm not saying like crying, I'm just saying like we're passionate about what we do. And so when we have that friction at work or things aren't going well, we get riled up about it. And I think it's good to give yourself permission to not like everybody that you're going to work with, whether they're internal or whether they're your clients or suppliers. It's not possible to like everybody, but it is possible to be part of a high functioning team, even if you don't like them. So understand that you're liking or disliking your emotions, and it's okay as long as you can be professional and respectful. So you look at a football team, and you know, especially like the major leagues, NFL or something, the team, not just the players, the whole team is hundreds and hundreds of people. Do you think everybody on that team likes everybody else? No way. It's not possible. But when they get out there, they have a job to do and they do it. A military platoon or troop, do you think everybody in the same military platoon or troop likes everybody else in that same group? No way. It's not possible. But when they get out there, they have a job to do and they do it. It's possible to be high functioning and not necessarily like the people that you are with. You do have to be professional and you do have to be respectful under all circumstances, but nowhere in the standard operating procedures does it say you have to like people. And the seventh one is 4 magic words that are my favorite words in the whole world. And those 4 words are, I need your help. Stop saying, can you help me? And start saying instead, I need your help, because they work very differently. If I say, can you help me? You can say no. It's a yes or no question. And you might even have legitimate reasons. If I say, Tony, can you help me with this? He might say, gosh, Kelly, I'd love to, but I've got a deadline at 4 o'clock and, you know, I just can't today. I'm really sorry. I would if I could, but he's still saying no. If I say, Tony, I need your help, he's going to say, what do you need? What's going on? How can I help? I promise, it's guaranteed. That's the reaction. We don't just say, I need your help, and then the other person says no. What they want to do is find out how they can help you. And even if they can't help you in that moment, what they'll do is they'll connect you to somebody else who can. They start to become emotionally involved and an emotional problem solver. So stop saying, can you help me? And start saying, I need your help. So I have another question for you. This is a polling question. And that is, was this information helpful to you? And I want to get your feedback on this because, and then we're going to roll into some questions. So was this information helpful to you? Yes, I can use a lot of the tactics, or no, this wasn't helpful, or C, this was somewhat helpful, or not sure. So I'm going to start the polling again. Let's see. Not this one. Bear with me. Just trying to get to the next one. Here it is. Was this information helpful to you? So you should have the opportunity now to respond. Yep, I can see some of you responding. Yep. Okay, looks like we got about 80% of the people who have responded. Just give them another couple of seconds in case those others wish to respond. But I think we've got the trend here. All right. I'm going to go ahead and end the polling. I think we've got the majority of the respondents. And here are the results. So 75% said, yes, I can use a lot of the tactics. And then the other 25% said this was somewhat helpful. So I would consider that successful. And let me get then to the next slide. Thank you for participating and for sharing your feedback. So wrapping up, and then I'll be happy to take your questions. 5 things to do and remember when it comes to working with people not like you. Understand that working with people not like you can be challenging and frustrating, and that makes you normal, not alone and not a bad person. That is the actual normal reaction. So nobody ever said it was going to be easy, and that is why people don't want to do it. So it's very important that you understand and just sort of give yourself a little bit of grace on that. Have conversations and not debates. Debates, somebody wins and somebody loses. A conversation is collaboration. I see it differently. Adapt to others and their differences. Try to give people what they want. I gave you the example of women liking expansive choices and men preferring options in 3. But also, like I said, ask your clients or anybody else that you're setting up meetings and calls with, what do you prefer? I will tell you that right now I'm experiencing an awful lot of people who are having difficulty with video meetings because their kids did not go back to school as they expected that they would in August. And so their home is still just complete chaos. And they're like, it's just easier if I can talk to you, because if I even have to walk outside and take this call, I can. And I think that we have to be sensitive to that. And I think it's a good practice to just ask people that you're dealing with, what do you want to do? I can do anything you want, and let them drive. And then talk straight and use simple language, especially when it's a tough conversation. It's hard to do, but it's important. And as I said, nothing will erode trust faster than people wondering what you're not telling them. And use, I need your help. So you're going to get a copy of this presentation, and I want to leave you with my favorite proverb of all time, and that is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go farther, go together. And now, this is my book on this topic. If this was helpful, you can get a deeper dive on all of this. It's a fast and easy read, and it's available wherever books are sold. And now we'll take your questions.
All right, thanks, Kelly. If you have a question, simply hover over the Q&A button and submit it there, but I have one for you.
Okay.
While we wait. Yep. When hiring someone new, how do you avoid disqualifying them just because they have a different background?
That's a really good question. When hiring somebody new, how do you avoid disqualifying them just because they have a different background? So I'm going to assume that, because there's 2 ways I could interpret background, and maybe Tony, if you could actually respond to the person who put that question, it would help me to get a little more context, because I don't know if you mean background like outside the industry, like, I don't know, maybe they used to work in retail and now they're in sheet metal or something, or do you mean background like different race or ethnicity, different age,
different race, ethnicity, age.
Different race or ethnicity. What I would do, first of all, is I would make sure that everyone on your team realizes that that's illegal, that just summarily dismissing someone because, or not giving them the opportunity to interview with your company simply based on race or ethnicity is illegal, and that's just not done. What you can do is interview for fit, and obviously qualifications, but you want to interview for fit, and because the qualifications should be pretty concrete. Is this person qualified to do the job that you're looking for? And then on top of that, if the answer is no, they go away. If the answer is yes, they get to the next level of interviewing. And that is this person a good fit for our company and our culture? I mean, if somebody's really argumentative and your company is super collaborative, that's not going to be a good fit. So what I would say is try to learn as much as you can about a candidate before deciding that, and then make sure that your people who are doing the hiring are not putting you or your company in a situation that could be discriminatory or perceived as discriminatory. And I think one of the things that you can share with them is that different perspectives is what this is about. So that if you're expanding your workforce and you're looking for different perspectives, I mean, most companies are trying to add different perspectives, that while that might be new to your company, it's an important thing. And then you can decide if that particular individual is a good fit or not. But you can't just dismiss it on race alone or ethnicity. Is that helpful or clear?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Okay.
I don't see any other open questions. So if you have any final thoughts to wrap up today, Kelly?
Free consulting. We'll just give it a minute here, a few more seconds, and see if anybody has anything. Let me go back to, if I may, let me go back to that question too. The other thing that most businesses are striving for right now is to make sure that their business is a fair and equal work culture for everyone. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone. Old, young, black, white, male, female. And with that in mind, you want to be very careful if there's someone on your team that's not thinking like that. Now, there's skills that need to be developed in this area because this is a new area for a lot of companies and people are afraid of making, the wrong move and doing the wrong thing. But the wrong thing, the real wrong thing right now would be to just dismiss somebody because they're a different race or ethnicity. So I would just caution you to educate yourself a little bit on this and then understand that what most businesses are striving for and driving for is a fair and equal work opportunity for everyone on the team.
Thank you. Any other further thoughts while we wrap up today?
No, I hope this was helpful. I mean, it sounds like many people got a lot out of this. Use those tactics. I will tell you that I see it differently. I had a woman email me from a speaking engagement that I did 2 years ago. She emailed me out of the blue and she said, I just got out of a meeting and I wanted to let you know that I've been using I See It Differently for over 2 years. And she said, I have a very difficult boss. I've been using it with him and it works great. And she said, but I just got out of a meeting where that saved the day. And she said, I thought I'd drop you a line. And so people really do tell me all the time that works. So when the next time you get into that, perspective stalemate, just try I See It Differently and see how that changes the dynamic. People kind of get their defenses down. It moves the business forward. Oh, there's another question, I think. Let me look. You kind of went over the topic of age discrimination, which is quite prevalent in the workplace today. Your thoughts? Age discrimination, unfortunately, and especially in your industry, is very prevalent. And what I would say is that one of the things that you can communicate to your enterprise and your teams overall is, according to the numbers that I've seen in your industry, there is going to be a steady march of top people leaving your industry in the next 8 years for retirement, permanently leaving, never coming back. And with that, with all that knowledge walking out the door, comes a lot of intellectual capacity that you enjoy right now. You have problem solvers, you have experienced people that know what to do, that know everything, and they're all gonna leave. So most organizations in your industry right now are desperately trying to infuse their teams with younger blood. And what I think is harder for older people who have tons of experience and they know everything is to work with someone who doesn't know anything, because it's just, a 30-year gap or 20, they just don't have the experience. There's a real opportunity for those older professionals to be mentors and guides to younger people. And it's imperative, because otherwise all that intellectual property, intellectual capacity goes out the door. Those are veterans of knowledge, and that knowledge needs to be passed on. So I would say try really hard to actually infuse your teams with younger candidates whenever possible. And then to get people on board with that, I would engage them in saying, you have always been important to this organization. You've never been as important as you are right now, Joe, because you have 30 years of experience and I need your help. I need your help. I need you to help me train and bring along a younger workforce, or we're going to be in a bad spot. And I think, again, when you kind of deal very bluntly with people and ask for their help or tell them that you need their help, they will see that you need it, and they will more than meet you halfway. But then I think you've also got to create an opportunity in your culture where those young people don't feel dismissed, minimized, or disrespected. I mean, it has to actually be real, which is, we don't just want you for your youth, but we respect you as well. Because the other thing I've heard is that a lot of young people will join an organization and 6 months later, after you've spent a ton of time training them, they leave. And they leave because they felt isolated. And so I think to the extent that you can pair somebody up with a buddy, make sure that person doesn't feel alone, make sure that person has somebody to go to lunch with from time to time. I mean, the little things that make someone feel connected to an organization are important. It's a challenge because you got to take care of the older executive who knows everything and has been working, and the younger newbie who knows nothing, and you got to bring them all together and make both of them feel valuable. It's not easy, but the fact that you're asking this question tells me that you're paying attention to that. So you're further down the road than most. Does that help? I'm hoping that the person who answered that or asked that question will let me know if that was helpful. Let's see. Anything else, Tony?
No, I don't see any other further questions. As Kelly did mention, the next few days you'll receive an email from Lori that will have the recording of this presentation as well as a slide deck. Also, keep checking your email. We have a lot of great educational opportunities coming up in the next few months. So we've been on top of this virtual classroom, and we will keep providing types of programs that we think are good for everybody. So thanks again, Kelly. Appreciate
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
for joining us. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.